The great obsidian dais, the heart of the glyptal concordance, was a platform of absolute black, a singularity of polished stone that drank the light of the chamber's hovering lumen spheres and gave nothing back. Upon it sat the triumvirate, the three beings who balanced an alliance of worlds stretched thin across a galactic arm. Today that balance felt precarious, the air thick with unspoken fear and overt contempt, all of it directed toward a single, newly discovered species: humanity. The data streams flowed like spectral rivers in the air before them, holographic displays of star charts, biological scans, and most damningly, technological assessments. They flickered across the crystalline form of Grand Marshal Vorlag of the Cathar, each photon a fresh insult to his warrior sensibilities. His body, a towering geology of silicon and pride, seemed to tense with every new packet of information, his multifaceted limbs clicking softly against the stone of his throne. He saw only weakness. He saw a species that had barely clawed its way out of its gravity well, a scattered and disorganized people who used technology that was, by concordant standards, practically archaic. "It is an affront," Vorlag's voice resonated not from a mouth, but from the grinding of his internal crystalline structures, a sound like a mountain shifting in its sleep. "They broadcast their presence with crude radio waves, a child shouting in a library. Their primary vessel, the one they use to patrol their own star system, is an abomination of primitive physics, fission reactors for tertiary power, kinetic slug throwers for point defense. Its armor is a simple metallic alloy, thick and brutish, with no discernible energy dissipation matrix. They have breached the celestial treaty of first contact with their incompetence, polluting the void with their technological illiteracy." He gestured with a sharp, bladed limb toward the largest hologram, which depicted a blocky, unaesthetic human ship. Its lines were harsh, its design asymmetrical. It was scarred with meteorite impacts and radiation burns that its hull had clearly not been designed to deflect, only to endure. "We should not be debating their inclusion. We should be planning their assimilation. Their system is rich in heavy metals we require, and their species is clearly in no position to refuse a generous offer of protective governance." From his right, a different form of life offered a different perspective. Archivist John, a luminier, was a being of coherent light, a swirling nebula of soft blues and purples contained within a vaguely humanoid force field. Her voice was a complex harmony of chimes and resonant frequencies, translated by the dais into comprehensible speech for the others. "Generosity, Grand Marshal, is not a word I would associate with the Cathar Imperium's foreign policy," she sang, her light pulsing gently. "And you are reading the data, but you are not seeing the patterns. There are anomalies, contradictions that should give us pause." Her form drifted slightly forward, her light illuminating different aspects of the holographic display. "Their radio signals, while crude, are encrypted with a mathematical complexity that our finest cryptographers have found elegant. They are not shouting randomly. They are whispering in a language we were not meant to understand, yet broadcasting it on a channel everyone can hear. It is a paradox, a deliberate act of misdirection, perhaps." "A clever primitive is still a primitive," Vorlag grated. "Their vessel's power signature is a chaotic mess of fusion reactions, barely contained. Our sensors indicate it leaks radiation like a sieve. It is a testament to their desperation, not their elegance." "And yet," Jean countered, her light flaring with intellectual passion, "the vessel has been operational for a period our dating sensors cannot accurately resolve. The metallic decay of its outer hull suggests centuries of continuous use, perhaps even millennia. But the power core, for all its leaks, shows no sign of degradation. It is a stable, continuous inferno, a captured star in miniature that burns with impossible efficiency for such a primitive design. We mock its brutish armor, yet micrometeoroid scoring patterns indicate it has weathered assaults that would have stripped the shields from one of our own cruisers. It does not deflect, Grand Marshal. It endures. There is a difference. One is a function of technology, the other is a function of philosophy. I am unsettled by their philosophy." In the center of the dais, silent until now, was First Spore Valerius of the Silthrin. He was ancient, a creature that was equal parts sentient plant and ancient flesh, his body a gnarled, living throne of wood-like sinew and bioluminescent fungi. His people were the oldest in the concordance, the anchors of its long history, and he spoke with the slow, deliberate finality of a forest growing. His voice was the rustle of a billy. "On leaves, the groan of ancient wood. Fear and ambition are the twin poisons of empires, Vorlag, and intellectual curiosity, Jean, can sometimes mistake a shadow for a monster. We have only data. We lack understanding. The humans have not trespassed on Concordance territory. They have not made any aggressive overtures. They exist. That is their only crime in your eyes. Valerius extended a long, vine-like tendril and touched the hologram of the human ship. It shimmered under his touch. This vessel, he mused, they call it the Wanderer, a name that suggests a journey without a destination, a pilgrimage, not a conquest. They have made a single formal request in response to our discovery of them, to send an ambassador to the Obsidian Dais. They ask for nothing. They offer nothing. They simply wish to speak. A trick! Vorlag slammed a crystalline fist onto his throne, sending a sharp cracking sound through the silent chamber. They know they have been discovered by a superior power. They will come here to beg for their sovereignty, to plead for scraps from our table. It is the way of the weak. Let them come. Let their ambassador see the might of the Concordance. Let him feel the shadow of our fleets. Then, when he is suitably humbled, we will dictate the terms of their surrender. Jean's light dimmed to a deep, worried violet. Humility is a virtue you have never understood, Grand Marshal, and I fear you are underestimating the value of it in others. They have not responded with fear. Their communications are calm, terribly calm. When our scout fleet warped into their system, their only response was a message sent via a simple light pulse containing prime numbers and the chemical composition of water. A universal greeting, not a defensive posture, not a threat. A hello. They are behaving as if they have been expecting us. Valerius let the silence stretch, allowing the weight of Jean's words to settle. The Cathar saw a target, the Luminire saw a puzzle, and he, the Silthran, saw a fulcrum upon which the future of the Concordance might pivot. He had seen empires rise on the promise of conquest and fall into the dust of their own arrogance. He had seen civilizations blind themselves with their own brilliance, unable to perceive truths that lay in the quiet, shadowed places. The humans were a shadow. A new and unknown shape in the celestial dark. "We will grant their request," Valerius said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "The human ambassador will be brought to the dais. We will hear what they have to say. We will watch. We will listen. And we will not allow our pride or our fear to write this chapter of our history for us." Vorlag subsided, his crystalline form radiating a low, angry heat, but he did not defy the first spore. The decision was made. The invitation was sent. And across the void, the ship called the Wanderer, a vessel deemed a relic, an antique, an embarrassment of cosmic engineering, began its slow, ponderous journey toward the heart of the Glyptal Concordance, carrying within it an answer to a question the aliens had not yet learned to ask. The journey itself became a source of further mockery among the Cathar commanders tasked with its escort. The human ship did not utilize a warp drive, nor did it fold space or tear holes in spacetime. It engaged a device that generated a subtle gravitational wave, a ripple that allowed it to slide between the currents of the universe. It was impossibly slow. A Cathar dreadnought could cross the same distance in a tenth of the time. The escort fleet was forced to make dozens of short, precise jumps, circling back to wait for the laggard vessel, like predators escorting a tired old beast to the slaughter. The human ship ignored them. It did not respond to hails after the initial acceptance of the escort. It did not deviate from its course. It simply moved, a silent, scarred monolith against the backdrop of swirling nebulas and distant galaxies. Its very presence was a source of profound irritation for Vorlag, who monitored the procession from his command ship, the Blade of Inevitability. His sensor technicians reported the same baffling data over and over. The hull was just metal. No active hardening, no ablative layers, no stealth composites. The power core was a fusion reaction of hydrogen and helium, a process so basic it was taught to Cathar children in their first cycle of education. Yet it hummed with a resonance that defied their models, a deep, thrumming beat that felt less like a machine and more like a heart. "Their life support must be archaic," one of his bridge officers commented, his voice a series of sharp clicks. "The atmospheric leakage from the hull seams is measurable. They are bleeding their own air into the void." Vorlag stared at the screen at the slow, pathetic progress of the Wanderer. "They are a failed species," he declared to his bridge crew, his voice a proclamation of absolute certainty. "A biology. Dead end that achieved rudimentary spaceflight and then stagnated for centuries. They cling to this relic because it is all they have. Their arrival at the dais will be their final act of significance before they are absorbed into the grand narrative of the Cathar Imperium. Let them bleed their air. Soon they will breathe ours." But even as he spoke the words, a sliver of doubt, sharp and cold as a shard of ice, lodged itself deep within his crystalline mind. It was the memory of Jean's words. "They are behaving as if they have been expecting us." The calm, The unnerving, profound calm, it was not the behavior of a cornered animal, it was the posture of something waiting. The day of the ambassador's arrival was a spectacle of calculated intimidation. The docking bay of the Concordance's capital station, a moon-sized structure that orbited the planet of the dais, was lined with Cathar honor guards, their crystalline bodies polished to a mirror sheen, their plasma lances held at a rigid, menacing angle. Luminire sentinels floated in the high-vaulted ceiling, their light a brilliant, judgmental white. The air itself, thick with the scent of ozone and recycled water, hummed with the power of the station's core. The Wanderer drifted into the cavernous bay with the same slow, ungraceful momentum it had maintained throughout its journey. Its docking clamps, thick magnetic grapples, slammed onto the station's moorings with a jarring clang that echoed through the bay, a sound of crude metal on refined alloy. It was a sound that made Vorlag, watching from an observation deck with Jean and Valerius, permit himself a small, grinding sound of satisfaction. It was the sound of a primitive yielding to the superior. The airlock of the Wanderer hissed, not with the smooth, silent efficiency of Concordance technology, but with a gravelly sigh like an old creature taking a final, weary breath. The outer door ground open, revealing an inner door that looked more like a bank vault's, a thick circle of metal studded with massive rivets. It took a full minute for the inner door to retract, and then 3 figures emerged. They were bipedal, soft-fleshed, and utterly unprotected. They wore no environmental suits, no armor, not even the simplest of personal energy shields. Their clothing was a simple, dark blue fabric, unadorned and functional. The central figure, a female of the species, stepped forward. Her hair was dark, pulled back from a face that was pale and composed. Her eyes, a deep brown, swept across the honor guard, the towering architecture, and the observation deck where the triumvirate watched, and they showed no fear, no awe. They showed only a placid, neutral curiosity. This was Ambassador Eva Rostova. Vorlag felt a surge of contempt. They were even more fragile than the scans suggested. A single burst from a plasma lance and they would be vaporized. This was their ambassador, this soft, unassuming creature. He turned to the others. They mock us with their frailty. Or, Jean's resonant voice whispered, they are making a statement about where their strength truly lies. Notice, Grand Marshal, they are breathing our air. Their biology is perfectly adapted to our station's atmosphere. The odds of such a coincidence are infinitesimal. Valerius remained silent, his ancient form unmoving, his gaze fixed on the human ambassador as she and her 2 aides were escorted from the docking bay toward the transport that would take them to the obsidian dais. The first spore had lived long enough to know that the most dangerous things in the universe were not the ones that roared and brandished their claws. They were the ones that watched and waited and carried the weight of millennia in their silent, patient eyes. The grand chamber was silent as Ambassador Rostova was led to the foot of the obsidian dais. The lumen spheres cast long, dramatic shadows that made the hall seem even larger, the thrones of the triumvirate more imposing. She stood alone in the center of the vast, polished floor, her 2 aides standing respectfully at the chamber's edge. She was a tiny figure in an immense space designed to crush the spirit. She did not look crushed. She looked present. Grand Marshal Vorlag leaned forward on his throne, his crystalline mass seeming to loom over her. "Human," he boomed, his voice a tectonic rumble. "You stand in the heart of the glyptal concordance before the arbiters of 1,000 worlds. You have come in a vessel that is an insult to the very concept of space travel. Its design is flawed, its power source is primitive, and its defenses are non-existent. Explain your presence. Justify your species, continued existence before we decide it for you." Ambassador Rostova met his gaze without flinching. Her voice, when it came, was clear and steady, amplified by the chamber's acoustics. It held no tremor of fear, no plea for mercy. "Grand Marshal Vorlag," she began, her tone one of polite, formal address. "I thank you for your candid assessment of our vessel, the Wanderer." There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause. "You are not wrong in your observations. In fact, your sensors are remarkably precise. The ship's hull is indeed a simple titanium-tungsten alloy. Its primary power is a deuterium-tritium fusion reaction, and its kinetic defenses are, as you say, rudimentary." Vorlag's internal structures grated in what might have been a sneer. "You admit your inferiority, then? This will be a short negotiation." "I admit to the facts of your observation," Rostova corrected him gently. "I do not, however, accept your conclusion." She gestured slightly with one hand, a small, subtle movement. "The reason you find our technology so primitive is because it is. You mocked our ship, not understanding its purpose. You assumed it was the pinnacle of our engineering. a common mistake born of a perspective that measures strength only by what is displayed. The Wanderer is not a warship, it is a museum. A profound silence descended upon the chamber, thicker and more complete than before. Even Vorlag was stunned into stillness. Jean's nebula of light pulsed, her form brightening with intense curiosity. Valerius, for the first time, shifted his massive form, a slow creak of ancient wood and sinew. "A museum?" Jean's harmonious voice chimed, breaking the quiet. "Explain this. The energy readings, the material decay, our sensors tell us that vessel is ancient." "They are correct," Ambassador Rostova affirmed. "The Wanderer was constructed 10,427 of your standard years ago. It was one of the first generation of interstellar colony ships built during our initial expansion from our home world, which we call Earth. It is not the best we have. It is, in fact, one of the first things we ever built that could reliably carry us between the stars." The implication of her words washed over the triumvirate in three distinct waves. For Jean, it was a wave of pure electrifying revelation. A pattern hidden in plain sight had just snapped into focus with blinding clarity. For Valerius, it was a wave of deep, ancient respect, the recognition of one long-lived culture for another. But for Vorlag, it was a wave of ice-cold dread, 10,000 years. The Cathar had been sharpening rocks on their home world 10,000 years ago. The concordance itself was barely half that age. The technology they had dismissed as primitive was older than their entire civilization. Vorlag struggled to regain his composure, his arrogance fighting a losing battle against a dawning, monstrous terror. "A lie," he grated, though the conviction in his voice was gone, replaced by a raw, brittle desperation. "A pathetic bluff to save your insignificant species. If you possess such advanced technology, where is it? Why hide behind this relic?" "Because power displayed is a threat," Rostova said, her voice calm and measured, each word a carefully placed stone in the foundation of a new reality. "And we did not come here to threaten you. We came here to understand you. For millennia, we have maintained a policy of non-interference, observing the unfolding tapestry of life in this galactic arm from a respectful distance. We watched the birth of the concordance. We witnessed the Cathar Imperium's first conquest. We saw the Luminaire scholars chart the cosmic background radiation. We have been your silent neighbors since before your species knew the stars were other suns." She paused, letting the weight of this revelation settle into the very stone of the chamber. "We chose the Wanderer for this meeting for a very specific reason. It is a symbol, a reminder to ourselves of where we came from. It is a testament to endurance over aggression. Its hull is not shielded, it is hardened. It has weathered the storms of 10 millennia of travel, not by deflecting them, but by being strong enough to withstand them. It is a statement of our philosophy. We are not conquerors. We are survivors, and we have survived for a very, very long time." Vorlag was speechless. The foundation of his entire worldview of Cathar supremacy and the manifest destiny of his people had been shattered in a single, quiet speech. He looked at the small, soft-fleshed creature before him and no longer saw a weakling to be crushed. He saw a representative of something ancient and vast, a power so profound it had no need of displays or boasts. It simply was. Jean's light pulsed in a complex, rapid sequence of colors, her mind racing to process the new information. The elegant encryption, the paradoxical broadcast, the calm response, it all made sense now. It was not the behavior of a primitive species, but of an elder race testing the character of its younger neighbors. "You have been watching us," she sang, her voice filled with awe. "All this time. The great filter that all young species fear. You are the ones who passed through it, are you not? You are the ease we have been looking for, the elders, the first ones." "We do not use such titles," Rostova said with a small, sad smile. "We are simply human, and we have made many mistakes on our long journey. We have learned, often through great pain, that the true measure of a civilization is not its capacity for destruction, but its capacity for wisdom. The wisdom to know when to act and when to simply watch and wait." She turned her gaze to Valerius, who had remained impassive, absorbing everything. "First spore. We broke our long silence and sent this vessel, this message from our distant past, for a reason. Not because you discovered us, but because the time for watching is over. There is a reason we chose to speak now." The chamber, which had been filled with the tension of contempt and judgment, was now saturated with a new, more profound tension. The tension of revelation. The triumvirate of the Glyptal Concordance, the most powerful political body in this arm of the galaxy, now looked upon the human ambassador not as a supplicant, but as an oracle. The balance of power had not just shifted. It had been inverted with a terrifying, silent suddenness. The mockery was over. The real conversation, the one that would decide the fate of all of them, was about to begin. First spore Valerius slowly unfurled another of his vine-like limbs, its bioluminescent tip glowing with a soft, green light. The gesture was one of deep contemplation, of a mind that measured time in seasons, not seconds. For long moments he was silent, the only sound in the grand chamber the faint, harmonic hum of Jean's light form and the subtle, sharp crackle of Vorlag's cooling crystalline body. The Grand Marshal's arrogance had been immolated, leaving behind only the slag of pure, unadulterated shock. He was a weapon that had been aimed at a mountain, only to discover the mountain was a living volcano. "You speak of wisdom," Valerius's leafy voice finally rustled, the sound filling the hall with the weight of ages. "It is a rare commodity in this galaxy. My people have lived for a long time, human. We have seen sons born and we have watched them die. We have seen species rise to touch the void, only to burn up in the fire of their own pride. We learned long ago that the universe does not reward ambition. It rewards patience. Your species appears to have learned this lesson as well, though your path to it was, I suspect, far swifter and more violent than our own." He paused, his ancient gaze fixed on her. "You said the time for watching is over. A long silence has been broken. Such an act is not undertaken lightly by a people who value patience. Something has changed. Some variable has entered the great equation that has forced your hand." Ambassador Rostova gave a slow, solemn nod. "That is correct, First Spore. Our policy of non-interference was predicated on a single fundamental assumption, that the civilizations we observed would be allowed to grow or fail on their own merits, that their stories would be their own to write. That assumption is no longer valid. The context has changed." She took a deep breath, and the simple, biological act seemed profound in the alien chamber. "We did not come here to ask for membership in your concordance. We did not come to negotiate territory or trade resources. We came to offer a warning and to extend an invitation." Vorlag, finally finding his voice again, spoke, but all the bluster and threat was gone. It was replaced by a hollow, uncertain grinding. "A warning? From what? The Concordance has no rivals in this sector. We have pacified the G-Gnarl pirates. We have treaties with the Void Swimmers. There are no credible threats to our dominion." "Your dominion," Rostova said, her voice laced not with condescension but with a deep, weary sadness, "is a single grain of sand on an infinite shore. You have been so focused on the politics of this galactic arm, on your rivalries and your treaties, that you have failed to look beyond the horizon. You have been measuring your strength against your neighbors, while we have been measuring our existence against the silence of the cosmos." At a gesture from Rostova, one of her aides, a tall, silent man, produced a small, smooth black sphere. He placed it on the floor. With a soft hum, the sphere projected a vast, three-dimensional hologram that filled the center of the chamber. It was a perfect, breathtakingly detailed map of their own galaxy, the Milky Way, a swirling spiral of billions of stars. The level of detail was staggering. The Concordance's own star charts, the product of centuries of exploration and Jean's life's work, were a crude sketch in comparison. This map was a photograph, a living portrait of the galaxy. "This is our home," Rostova said softly. "As we know it. For the last several thousand years, our most advanced observatories, not optical telescopes but quantum entanglement arrays that can perceive the state of reality across vast distances, have been engaged in a single project, the Great Census, an attempt to map not just the stars but the presence of life and energy on a galactic and intergalactic scale." Her finger traced a path on the control interface she held. The map zoomed out. The Milky Way became a single point of light among a cluster of others, the local group. It zoomed out further, revealing the Virgo supercluster, a vast filament of galaxies, a river of light and matter stretching across millions of light years. The scale was so immense it was almost incomprehensible, a divine tapestry of creation. Vorlag, Jean, and Valerius watched, captivated. They had never seen the universe from this perspective, with this clarity. "It is beautiful, is it not?" Rostova asked quietly. "A universe teeming with potential, with light, with life. We have detected the faint signatures of nascent civilizations in thousands of these galaxies. The echoes of technological societies, much like your own, much like our own once was." Then she made another adjustment. A section of the supercluster, a vast region on the far periphery of the map, began to change. A deep, unsettling red border appeared around a cluster of several dozen galaxies. "This data," she said, her voice dropping to a somber, grave tone, "is from 500 of your years ago. Now this is the data from today." She touched the interface again. The galaxies within the red border did not explode. They did not burn out. They simply vanished. The light went out. The energy signatures ceased. The very fabric of spacetime in that region, as depicted on the map, seemed to flatten to become null. Where there had been a vibrant cluster of island universes, there was now only a perfect, featureless, absolute blackness. It was not empty space, which still contains background radiation and quantum foam. This was an absence, a void, a hole in reality itself. Jean's light form flickered violently, her harmonic voice a discordant shriek of pure intellectual horror. Impossible! The laws of thermodynamics, entropy, a galaxy cannot simply cease to be. It would take trillions of years for all its stars to burn out. This is a violation of all known physics. The physics you know are local, Rostova said, her eyes fixed on the encroaching darkness on the map. We call it the Great Silence. It is not a natural phenomenon, it is not entropy, it is a presence, an active, consuming force, and it is spreading. She updated the map again. A new, larger red border appeared, encompassing the old one and a swath of new galaxies adjacent to it. This is its current position. Its rate of expansion is accelerating. In the last century, it has consumed a volume of space that contains more stars than exist in our entire galaxy. It does not travel through space. It erases it, and it is moving in the direction of our supercluster. The obsidian dais, for the first time in its long history, felt small. The triumvirate, the masters of 1,000 worlds, were rendered utterly insignificant by the scale of the threat now displayed before them. Their fleets, their armies, their political squabbles. It was all the desperate maneuvering of children in a sandbox, oblivious to the rising tide that was about to wash them all away. Vorlag stared at the map, his multifaceted eyes wide with a terror so profound it transcended his own species' experience. This was not a foe to be fought with plasma lances and dreadnoughts. This was an existential negation. "What is it?" he managed to grind out, the words scraping their way from his throat. "We do not know," Ambassador Rostova answered, her honesty more terrifying than any lie. "We have no data on its composition because it has none. We have no insight into its motives because it displays no signs of consciousness. It is simply an end, a finality that moves. We have spent centuries studying it from afar, and all we have learned is its speed and its direction. By our most conservative estimates, the silence will reach the outer edges of our own galaxy in approximately 5,000 years. 5,000 years. To a Cathar, an eternity. But to a Silthran like Valerius, it was the blink of an eye. To a species that had existed for 10,000 years or more, it was tomorrow. "This is why you have come," Valerius rustled, his ancient mind finally grasping the full, horrifying scope of the situation. "This is the warning." "It is," Rostova confirmed. "And it is also the invitation. We humans have been divided and scattered for much of our history, but in the face of this, we have become one. We are mobilizing our entire civilization. We are reawakening ancient technologies we had set aside, technologies that were deemed too dangerous, too powerful to be used in a sane universe. But our universe is no longer sane. We are preparing for a war not of conquest, but of survival. A war for the right of reality to exist." She turned off the terrifying map, and the chamber was PL. Unjed back into its own dim, solemn light. The absence of the hologram was somehow more menacing than its presence. The knowledge of that encroaching void now hung in the air, a permanent, invisible stain. "We cannot fight this alone," she said, her voice clear and strong, a single point of light in an infinite darkness. "No one can. The silence will not distinguish between human, Cathar, Luminire, or Silthran. It will not distinguish between the old and the young, the strong and the weak. It will simply erase. We came to you today not as superiors, not as elders, but as neighbors, as fellow inhabitants of a reality that is under threat. The Wanderer was not a sign of our primitive past. It was a symbol of our beginning, a reminder that all great journeys start with a single, humble step. Now all life that wishes to continue must take the next great step together. We are inviting the Glyptal Concordance to join us, to stand with us, to lend your knowledge, your strength, your spirit to the defense of everything that is." The chamber was silent. The offer had been made. The truth had been revealed. The foreigners who had mocked human tech now understood. They had not been looking at the technology of a young, weak species. They had been looking at a single, dusty page from the first chapter of a very, very long book. And they now knew with chilling certainty that the final chapter was being written for all of them, and the ink was the endless, silent dark. Valerius, the first spore, the being of wood and time, slowly rose from his living throne. The movement was ancient and profound, a forest stirring itself for a great migration. He looked down from the obsidian dais at the human ambassador, and in his ancient, glowing eyes there was no longer any question, no longer any debate. There was only a shared, terrible purpose. "Your invitation," he said, his voice the sound of a world turning toward a new, uncertain dawn, "is accepted."